And it's at the last meeting, I just sent out a call for anybody with feedback on who they want to see the next officers to be, and or if they wanted to participate in the nominating committee. Well, I only got one, and so it seemed like we weren't going to be able to create a committee, but thankfully we've had Madeline and John that have been great participants in TCC, and based on my judgment, I think they would be great leaders, John as chair and Madeline as vice chair. And so I would like to nominate them. We will also entertain any nominations for any other members as we go through this. But I would like to make the motion that John would be the chair and Madeline would be the vice chair.
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. I'm going to open it up for discussion. If anybody else would like to add any comments or make any other nominations. Folks online, I'll give you another 10 seconds. Okay, so with that, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So I believe it's starting next meeting. John will be the chair. Is that right? John will chair the next meeting?
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Real quickly. Thank you, Luis, for chairing the committee for all these years. This is your last one. So
My pleasure.
Steph, just wants to acknowledge your
Yeah,
service.
thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to giving John the opportunity.
Promised it was going to be a long rain by Luis.
And then also just for those who know, I'm going to be rolling off of TCC. My job has changed to start. I'm focused more on day-to-day operations. And so Tony Filippini, our planning manager, is going to be Dart's representative. Next up, item 5, we have a report and vote on our SUDAS appointment. Senator, I think you're going to take that one.
I will. MPO periodically appoints a rep to the SUDAS board. This person is required to be PP. Mark Mueller has served in that role since 2016 and reached out offering to continue in that role. So staff has been very happy with this arrangement, and I haven't heard any complaints to the contrary, so we would recommend approval, but this is up for discussion and your consideration.
So first up, I'll see if there's a motion based on staff's recommendation. Motion and a second, thank you. Any other, I guess, comments, questions, other nominations, just to be fair? Great, so hearing a motion in a second, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor of Mark serving on SUDAS, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mark, for continuing to serve. Next up, we have item 6 to report and vote on the regional safety performance targets. And Addison, I think you're going to take that?
Yes, thank you, Luis. Morning, everyone. Familiar report, the regional safety performance targets. Oh, there we go. There's a delay, of course. So the FHWA requires state DOTs and MPOs to report safety performance measures. MPOs can either adopt the statewide targets or adopt their own. And previously in the past, the MPO adopted the statewide targets, but with development of the MPO's comprehensive safety action plan and the Vision Zero resolution, staff proposed to adopt our own regional safety performance targets. I'll just note there are no penalties for MPOs not meeting or making significant progress on those targets. Table before you with our proposed targets with a bit of clarification that wasn't there in January to show or to help explain why the targets for 2021 through 2025 are, some of them at least, are moderately higher than 2019 through 2023 baseline. Happy to take any questions, but this is before you for your approval.
Any questions for Addison? Okay, look for a motion in a second. Rudy, Mark? All those in favor of the motion and staff's recommendation, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for your work on that. Similarly, we have a report and vote on pavement and bridge performance targets. Addison?
Thank you. Similarly, under MAP 21 and FAST Acts, state DOTs and MPOs set their pavement and bridge performance targets. The Iowa DOT has adjusted its 4-year targets, and the MPO can either support those statewide targets or adopt their own. Previously, the MPO adopted the Iowa DOT statewide performance targets, and as with performance measure 1, there's no penalty to not meeting or making significant progress on those targets. There are a few adjustments to the percentage of pavements in good condition, percentage of pavements, interstate system in good condition, non-interstate system in good condition, and the percentage of bridges classified as in good condition. Off to the right, you can see those changes are bolded. Staff recommends adopting the state DOT targets, and I'm happy to answer any questions as to why these changes have been made or any questions you may have.
Can you explain how, I guess, what is the MPO going to do to ensure that targets are being met? I know for the previous one, the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan had recommendations on changes to programs goals. Like, how can you explain for these, how will you meet the targets? What is the process that you'll go to ensure?
So good question. I believe the MPO supports meeting these targets through our pavement forecasting, which we're updating our pavement forecast at this moment. The actual upkeep, of course, of road and interstate conditions is up to jurisdictions and the DOT. So there's not a whole lot of control that the MPO has there.
Things we have control over are data analysis as well as funding. And so these priorities are reflected in the analysis that we provide our jurisdictions, and then also with the funding, there's scoring that goes towards bridge replacement.
And these targets are only on the NHS, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And these targets too, I think it's also important to note, they don't reflect PC or their federal measures, not the same as those used by the Iowa DOT. So PCI for pavement and BCI for bridge condition. So these targets are federally measured, whereas the Iowa DOT has slightly different measures.
With few exceptions, most of the NHS routes are DOTs, right?
Not quite sure.
Correct.
Yes. Thank you, Marcus.
Addison, I understand the reason for dropping the percentage of the 4-year target for the second to last line bridges, because the actuals are 49%. But for the percentage of pavements, the middle one on the non-interstate NHS in good condition, even though the 2-year actual is 35, a little over 35%, we're dropping the 4-year target to 30%. Why is that?
So as I understand it from the DOT's report, and this is about pavement, not the bridge conditions. So, and due to inflation, I think the upkeep and the upkeep in 2022 through 2024 was a bit less than they predicted. And so they're adding that buffer there and decreasing the 4-year target to account for, as they said, natural disasters that may occur, and then also a bit of natural attrition due to decreased maintenance in that 4-year period.
Good questions and discussions. We do have a recommendation from staff. So looking for a motion on that, or any counter motions if there's numbers or anything that people are comfortable with, they want to see adjusted.
Statewide pavement for performance targets.
Rudy?
Second.
Second, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the topic before we vote? Pause for those online. Okay. All those in favor of the performance targets as recommended by staff, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Addison. Next up, I think Marcus, you are going to give us an overview of where we're at, with the comprehensive safety action plan.
Yes, thank you. As you all know, we're working on a comprehensive safety action plan. We're nearing completion of that. Tool Design Group has provided that draft document. And thank you to everyone who has taken the time to review that, provide comments. If you haven't provided comments on the actual plan draft yet, we still have time to do that. That's for the end of today. And now I think we're going to turn it over to Tool, who's going to kind of walk us through the components of the plan document. So.
Marcus, hi everyone. My name is John Murphy Lopez. I met with the group last month in January. We presented our outline of the plan and all the appendices at that meeting. And like Marcus mentioned, we have a draft plan out there, and those comments that came in from folks on the appendices were really helpful. And we've incorporated a lot of those changes, if not all of those changes, with one exception in one of the appendices, and I'll walk through that here a little bit after I go through the main parts of the plan first. So this is the cover sheet and the acknowledgements. I just want to mention up front, and we have a note on a later slide here, that this isn't a pre-designed format. These are all in Word documents right now, and we anticipate having our graphic designers put this into a nicer looking format. Our main concern right now is just making sure that folks are comfortable with the contents and have had any concerns or questions addressed. So on the next slide, the plan contents are chapters 1 through 8. And I'm going to give a highlight of a handful of those, and then appendices A through G. So the one I'm going to highlight first is on the next slide, and that's chapter 3. And chapter 3 is a summary of Appendix A. And Appendix A is called the Crash Analysis Report. And the key findings from that crash analysis were these 5 right here. So the first was that fatal and severe crashes are more common on bigger roads. The second was that men and young adults are more likely to be fatally or severely injured than women and older adults or children. The third was that fatal and severe crashes are more likely to occur in rural areas. That doesn't mean that there's a higher raw number. It just means that when there is a crash in a rural area, the percentage of those crashes that include a fatality or a severe injury are higher than in the urban areas. The fourth one, motorcyclists, pedestrians, and bicyclists are more vulnerable in crashes than motor vehicle occupants. That tends to be true, especially for motorists and pedestrians. Not as much bicyclists, but they are definitely still more vulnerable than motor vehicle occupants as well. And then the fifth one was that speeding and failing to yield are the 2 biggest causes of fatal and severe crashes. There are a lot of other findings in that crash analysis report. If you didn't have a chance to look at that, we'd certainly welcome you to do that. And then we did receive some comments on Appendix A, and we have addressed those comments, and those are included in an update that we've issued. And then the map on the right, this shows the high injury network for all modes in the Des Moines area. The next slide is summarizing Chapter 4, as well as Appendix B. Appendix E was a community engagement report, and Chapter 4 summarizes that appendix. And the key findings here were that the public thinks that unsafe driving practices are the most prominent contributor to transportation safety issues. We heard a lot about wanting expanded infrastructure for walking and biking. We also heard that consistency and visibility with pavement markings, signs, and signals is an area for improvement. And the conversations with first responders and law enforcement officials was very helpful, and it highlighted the need to improve roadway behavior and also highlighted trainings needed to support crash response after a crash has occurred. On the next slide, Chapter 5 is a summary, for the most part, of Appendix E and Appendix F. And this slide right here just shows this is what's covered in detail in Appendix E, which is the countermeasures toolkit. And this is a chart showing about a third of the infrastructure countermeasures. There are main overarching categories for countermeasures, and this lists all the countermeasures under the intersections category. And we've included the estimated costs and the timeline. The image from the right, this shows more detailed information from Appendix E, and we're hoping to make these into nicer looking handouts that can be used by communities for the different countermeasures. The next slide, this just shows the other side. Actually, I think, oh, maybe I'm missing one here. If you can go back one slide there and then go forward again. Nope, I just forgot what I put in here. So Appendix F is covered also in Chapter 5. This is what I'm going to go into a little more detail because we have not addressed all the comments from the committee on Appendix F at this point. This is about project priorities. So we have an overarching map, and then we have each individual community has their own map of project priorities, and these are rated on a critical, high, and medium scale. And if you could go to the next slide, this is a summary of the feedback that we heard from member communities on Appendix F. We do need more time to address these and anticipate that we can bring these a revised Appendix F back to the committee at the March meeting. So I'm just going to go over what those are just to make sure that folks know we heard you and roughly what our plan is for addressing these comments. So the first one, there are detailed charts in Appendix F after the map for each community. So take, for example, Altoona, which was the community on the previous slide where we had a map on the right-hand side. Each project has a number that's on the very left-hand column of that top chart where that top arrow is pointing to. And then all of the countermeasures are listed out. And there's about 25 or so infrastructure countermeasures. We heard that the specificity of that chart needs to be rethought or reconsidered. So one solution that we're thinking about is instead of focusing on each countermeasure, more focusing on the categories. And the four categories, or the three main categories rather, are intersections, bike and ped, and roadway departure. And roadway departure is more about rural issues. Intersections and bike ped tend to be more about urban issues, although intersections also apply to rural countermeasures. So we're thinking just to communicate that really we want communities to be able to pick from a menu. We don't want to get too specific, and we heard that feedback, so that's the tack we'd like to take there. The second one was that there were high injury street profiles, and one of the questions we heard was how are those determined? And we're going to examine how those high injury street profiles might be better used in the plan. So we're going to return to you all with some revisions there. The third, there was an idea to consider adding more detail about project scoring. Right now, we just have one category that explains the total score. And I think there was some interest from one of the commenters or communities about showing the different scores for I believe there are 4 or 5 or so factors that went into that score. And then we heard other comments on headings being missing, or headings missing, some street name errors, and project number and line errors. So if anyone notices anything, we want to make sure to work with you. So please let us know as soon as possible so that we can make those edits. The next slide shows Chapter 8. This is just a summary slide on what it would take to reach the goal of 0 fatalities. Chapter 8 also has a similar chart for severe injuries. So that's a summary of the plan. I'm happy to take any questions or listen to any discussion about it. We've laid out some options here for plan adoption. And those 3 options are to adopt the entire plan today with the recommended edits that have been made by member communities. The second is to adopt the whole plan today, except for Appendix F, so that we can return to you in March on that. And the third option too is adopt the plan at the March meeting.
So just really quickly, remember that last time we were trying to accelerate this timeline in anticipation of the NOFO for the next round of Safe Streets for All coming out in March. We're still expecting that to be coming out in March based on updates to USDOT's website as of January 22nd. So today we're just put these options out here just to make sure that we have the time to do reviews, edits, and get confidence from all of you as we move forward into plan adoption. So if you have any questions, Sean, myself, Gunnar, happy to take those.
So if we didn't adopt, say any of it, or even just not Appendix F, when would be the opportunity to do that, and what would be the impact?
The plan would be we could adopt at the March meeting, and then tentatively adopt, have it adopted by exec in March, and have the plan kind of adopted early March prior to the NOFO coming out.
The complication is that policy doesn't meet in March. And so we would have to ask policy to authorize exec to sign off on it in March, or call a special policy meeting in March. Those would be our options if we delayed everything.
And do any pending changes for Appendix F impact like which projects would be applied for?
Not necessarily. The changes in Appendix F will primarily be just to clean up the numbering, clean up the references to countermeasures. Like Sean mentioned, that there's a large table that said this street segment should have any number of these countermeasures, when really that segment is a priority and there should be a project there, but maybe those countermeasures need to be decided with more data analysis, research, and focus on what improvements be best for that location. And we don't want to lock any community into prescribed countermeasures that.
And is the thought that could happen in the next month, or is it that that's going to naturally just evolve over time and we're not going to try to be in that level of detail?
Yeah, the plan is that we would get the Appendix F refined prior to March. So whether we go ahead and adopt everything today, with the exception of Appendix F would come back to communities during the month of February prior to the next TTC.
Question?
Yeah, can you explain how, so all of the recommendations are specific, but then, and getting ahead a little bit about the grant that's coming next, that there's not like an overall recommendation, or these are the top things that we suggest are going to make the most impact for us to apply for. So how does that balance out with plan recommendation, then moving into how do we know what we're going to apply for?
Yeah, actually, that's a good segue into the next topic. We actually have a nice graphic of kind of the recommended projects that were brought forward by the communities and how those overlay with those key priorities and projects that we've identified. So that's kind of how we're focusing right now on moving forward into grant implementation, which we'll cover in the next topic.
So those things are included in the plan, but then the plan doesn't necessarily say they shall be this. It's a little bit of a separate process to determine what they shall be.
Yep.
Okay.
We have two hands online.
Yeah, please.
Paper.
Go ahead, Steve.
So what is the rush to do this? I mean, I guess just for reference, I met with FHWA earlier this week, and they're not going to sign our SS4A grant that we have, and so I'm not aware that there's a NOFO out right now. So I guess I'm struggling with hearing why we would not go with option 3, just wait to adopt the plan until we have the comments addressed. So
yeah, Steve, so the timing item that we were looking at, it's just when is the next NOFO coming out, and everything that we've seen so far is that USDOT still anticipates that NOFO coming out before the end of March. So that's
what you've heard from FHWA.
That's the latest news that they posted related to the NOFO.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I spoke with them just earlier this week, and they're not even going to sign the grant we have. So I'd be surprised if they would put a NOFO out when they can't even execute agreements that they have right now. So
does the plan have to be adopted before the NOFO is released, or before the grants are due?
before the grants are due.
Grants are due. Yeah, it's a component of the requirement for the future grant. John still has his hand up.
Yeah,
Yeah. The I guess the comment I didn't hear, we made a comment as far as Appendix F, and I didn't hear this in the remarks that Sean had. One of our concerns with the way Appendix F, and maybe you're going to address this, is that in the countermeasures at the grand table of potential countermeasures, at least from the city of Des Moines perspective, shows bike lanes on every single solitary corridor. And we're not going to do that. In fact, on case in point, East 14th, the study that Iowa DOT did with the city of Des Moines that HDR completed for us indicated that in that area and it's primarily the area north of University, that the suggestion was to develop parallel routes, bike boulevards, to address the need for bike lanes and not place them on East 14th because of the unsuitability in terms of large trucks and the narrowness of the street, that it was not practical. And so I really have an issue with showing bike lanes on every single solitary street when we know from a previous study that it's not practical. I'm concerned it puts us in a position that now we have to address things with the public because they see a plan that suggests that bike lanes are appropriate, where in fact, it probably is not the best thing. And there are other alternatives. So we're spending staff time explaining away what the previous study, that was a significant corridor study from southern city limit to northern city limit, says, no, this is not a good idea. And we look to some of our colleagues in the city of Portland, Oregon, where they're doing similar situations where bike lanes are not necessarily good in the context of every street because there are other things that need to be considered for that. So that's that's the point that we really had an issue with Appendix F. I'm glad to see that you're looking to change that. I guess to tag on to Steve's comment, I would recommend it. I will not vote for approval for the plan before March. I want to see the comments come back. I want to see kind of the resolution and see what it looks like. I don't believe there's a rush to approve the plan, because if and when the NOFO is produced, there is not a requirement to have the plan in place and approved before the NOFO is actually released. The city of Des Moines plan, we approved our plan 2 weeks before the NOFO was due. It was a July date, if I recall, we approved our plan at the end of June. Those are a couple of comments. The other comment or question I had was, is one of the deliverables still a Word document of the plan, so that it could be future iterations or changes could draw from that text more easily than in an InDesign document? And that's all.
John, thank you for the question. So just related to Appendix F, and your comments about, bike lanes not being appropriate on every street. Yes, we recognize that, and that's why we're kind of fine-tuning the way that we're displaying the countermeasures, so that instead of saying you need to have bike lanes, we're saying you need to generally think about pedestrian and bicycle improvements on these corridors without being prescriptive to specifics, of specifically saying bike lanes are required on Southeast 14th. That way, as you go through study and analysis of the corridor, you can say, here are the countermeasures that fit bike and ped that'll support safety on this corridor. That's how we're attempting to address that, is instead of having all 20 of those, we'll go back to those higher categories, and then the communities can work through what's appropriate for this project. On the deliverable question, yeah, I think we can get a Word document as a deliverable in support of the InDesign file so that we can have both versions. That shouldn't be an issue. So yeah, we can request that approval.
Thank you.
Can I ask, in this further refinement of Appendix F, is the team going to work with the individual communities, or is it just going to be sort of referencing the toolbox, as you stated, saying this is the pattern, go see the toolbox for a menu of things you can do? Or is the expectation that no, the cities need to engage and really help us make sure that we're setting expectations that align with the city?
I think right now we're moving toward the direction of keeping it at that higher level and allowing the communities to dig into the toolbox once they are ready to move forward with projects. Because a lot of these corridors might not be ready to go right now for countermeasures. So being too prescriptive might actually be detrimental. But if you have feedback on Appendix F still, send it our way, and we'll get it incorporated as we move forward, especially on the project maps and anything that you want to see related to communities.
Other comments, either about the content of the plan and or the next steps that staff recommended and that the Des Moines contingent has given some comments on?
Yeah, I think since comments aren't due until the end of the day today, and there's still several sections that need some work, I would also support waiting to talk.
Okay.
I agree with that. And we don't approve partial plans at the city when we do things, so I feel like we want to approve the whole thing at once.
Great.
So delaying.
Yeah. So I'm hearing a lot of confirmation in the room of holding off on approval for various reasons that have been discussed. Anybody online, just want to make sure we're getting all thoughts. Okay. So at this time, just based on what I'm hearing, I'm not going to ask for a motion a second to approve this. I think staff and the team have the direction of what they'd like to see continue to be approved on this. And of course, I'm sure we're going to get an update on funding that's going to say that we don't know anyway. So, okay. Well, thank you for your continued work on this, and we look forward to seeing the progress. So next up, there's not a vote on the table, but Marcus is going to give us an update on that application.
So while we don't know for sure when the NOFO is coming out, we still want to move forward with the process of getting prepared for grant applications. So again, we have tool design here to speak to some of the work that's being done to prep for the next phase, moving into grant development and identifying projects. I'll handle it.
All right, I'm going to get started here with this, and then I'll let Sean wrap up here too. So just as a reminder from our December workshop, is kind of the outcome that we landed on for what we're going to focus on for this grant application, having many smaller spot treatments of safety countermeasures spread across the region, plus a few key corridor intersection reconstruction modification projects. Along with that, we kind of heard from conversation plus follow-up conversation that a lot of those smaller spot treatments, targeting those towards access to schools, educational facilities, would be kind of the idea as to where to focus those treatment locations. So I'll go over kind of those treatment location, the spot treatments, and then also some of the key corridor improvement areas as well. If you go to the next slide, please. And just as a reminder, we're targeting a $25 million, which is the max federal funding amount, which would be about a $31 million project overall. So some of these smaller treatment areas, again, looking at these areas related to proximity to schools, and then also areas that are on the prioritization scoring network as well. So these aren't necessarily like, targeting the highest prioritization scores. We're just kind of trying to get the school proximity to those areas that are showing up on the scoring as well. So again, focused on safe access to schools, things that we might consider for these areas. A lot of these are spot areas. There are a few maybe more corridor type treatments as well, but pedestrian crossing, signal operations, in some cases, maybe adding a sidewalk or a shared use path in a gap area to allow for safe travel to school as well. I didn't include this in here because obviously it would overwhelm the map here, but as a more region-wide treatment that we would also look at retroreflective signal backplates as we discussed at our December TTC as well. We anticipate that this list will probably narrow down a little bit through conversations with communities coming up. And just to note, we are planning to have conversations with each community as to the suitability, what are we going to target for countermeasures, et cetera, for all of these locations. Each member community in the MPO has at least one project location on this smaller treatment areas map as well. So just as a heads up that we will be talking with your community about these issues in the future. Go to the next slide. This is the kind of key corridor improvement area. So it's that second part of the grant target. As you remember, each community was able to submit up to generally three projects per community that was based on what they were seeing on the prioritization scoring map. You can see those highlighted on the screen kind of with the blue or green say highlights there. And then this overlaps also with the prioritization metrics here as well, just so you know what's going on there. So the top five will say TTC voting. As you remember, those who were in person for the TTC meeting in December were able to vote for projects outside of their communities that they thought were most in need of focusing for this grant application. Listed kind of the top five locations here as well. 141 in Grimes, 163 in Pleasant Hill, Delaware Avenue in Ankeny, 65 in Ankeny and Raccoon River Drive in West Des Moines. A couple of those are either Iowa 141 has a separate SS4A funded study. So we are suggesting to not duplicate efforts for that corridor. I believe US 65 in Ankeny has an Iowa DOT upcoming project that may address some of those issues. We're potentially not going to focus on that project either. And it's not to say that we couldn't do more. These projects, we're kind of trying to figure out what our remaining budget is left over after the spot treatments are kind of narrowed down to understand how many of these corridor type projects that we would be looking at funding through this grant application for the future. The next slide, please.
I had a quick question on that. Is that US 69? Is that US 69 in Ankeny? Oh,
That's.
Yeah.
I couldn't hear.
okay. Just
I'm sorry if I
People-
typoed that. Yeah, I think you're right. Yes. All right. Yes. So next steps, we are, Sean will get into this in just a second here, but we are soliciting some input from the public on these preferred projects. But really the most, I think, biggest say impact to this group is that we'll be seeking input from communities and agency partners about the preferred project scopes. Really that'll focus around those countermeasures we've been talking about in Appendix E in Chapter 5. And this is kind of where, we were talking about, selecting the community's preferred countermeasures out of we'll say the bigger list of potential alternatives. We've got kind of our first ideas potentially in some of those areas that we can share with your communities as well when we get to those things. But just as a heads up that we will be chatting with all your communities and agency partners coming up here in the next month or so to nail down the scope of these projects so that we can get things drawn up and estimate costs and all the good stuff. And then also, as I'm sure everybody knows, there's a lot of question marks floating around about the forthcoming NOFO for the SS4A program. I unfortunately don't know all of the answers to all those questions at this point because just a lot of uncertainty going on with all of the federal funding opportunities right now. Once we know more, our ears are to the ground, so to speak, with our partners in Washington, D.C. and all over the place here to try to get our best idea of what will be coming through in that NOFO coming out here in the spring. Of course, our strategy will be based off of the input received from you all in December and also public input that we'll be soliciting here coming up shortly. And then returning to TTC with recommendations, of course. I believe that's scheduled for the April committee meeting to give us some time to do that legwork, those community meetings, and then getting that strategy put together. That meeting in early April with TTC will probably be a few weeks after the NOFO is out, and so we'll obviously know for sure what the NOFO will say then, but we're trying to do legwork before that all happens to make sure that all the communities are on board with the things that we'd be applying for with that grant. So Sean, go ahead to wrap up the open house coming up here.
Yeah, so we just wanted to make sure everyone knew about the open house. This is on the next slide. That is scheduled for this coming Monday between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. at the MPO offices. We're planning to have a presentation at 4:30, which we're going to record and then post on the MPO website. People can, of course, attend remotely if they'd like to do that, but we'd welcome people to come in person as well. And then we're going to have a public engagement survey at the open house. And it's going to include two main components. One is preferred projects. We want to understand where the public's at with that. We are going to ask for their zip code as well, so that if we hear from people almost exclusively about one particular project, if we know that those people are mostly in one zip code, that will help inform who it was that was taking the survey. So we'll, of course, take that into consideration. And then the second category is countermeasure input. So all of the countermeasures that are in Chapter 5 and Appendix E, like we've used an example here, this is under the roadway departures category, wider edge lines. We're going to ask the public how supportive they are on a 5-point scale from very supportive to very unsupportive about each of these countermeasures. And then everything we have in person, of course, at the open house, we'll also have online, and that online survey will be posted early next week. And we definitely encourage folks to share this with people in your community or other stakeholders. We'd love to get a lot of input on this survey.
Any questions on the grant application development process?
In the past grants that have been awarded, are they awarding at the full amount of 25 million?
I think it kind of depends on what all you include in the grant and what you're asked for, and what you're asking for in terms of project. So, in the first round, there were several communities that got the grants.
I just want to caution that we are not trying to come up with projects to meet that match. And then if it's not fully funded and we have to go back and ask communities, because we've been awarded money to do these specific projects, and communities are going to have to come up with a difference in order to meet the grant requirements what are the projects we actually need and want to do and have funding to do, even if the grant isn't awarded.
Or that the grant be awarded in a way that says it's scalable.
Yes.
We just do less.
Yes, and what those things are,
Yeah.
so that we're not over committing to things that if it's not awarded and it's not,
Yeah.
we're not asking cities to come up with difference.
Other comments and questions? No hands online?
Yeah, Luis, I have a
Yeah.
question. Are any of the I'll call them non-infrastructure items or measures or strategies going to be presented or discussed with the public?
So you're talking about like enforcement, education, that stuff?
Yes, I was just going to answer that because I think you're asking, John, about the open house. So at the open house during our presentation, we are going to give a more detailed overview of the plan, and that will be part of chapter 5, where we talk about countermeasures. We have both the infrastructure countermeasures, which we've had on the screen a couple times today, but we're going to also include the non-infrastructure countermeasures. And I think there is the possibility that some of those non-infrastructure countermeasures could be included in a grant application. And when we meet with the communities or reach out to the communities to talk about what they're interested in, we'll also include that list of non-infrastructure countermeasures. Because if a community is willing to do any of those, it would be good for us to know, and that could potentially strengthen the grant application.
Okay. And second question, while right now we don't have any strong clues or maybe even weak clues of what the NOFO is going to be contained, but presuming based on past notices, there's been an implementation grant component, and there's also been a planning and demonstration project. I guess, are we looking, or part of these presentations, are they going to differentiate those, or in the process, are we going to identify those that might be demonstration projects and further planning efforts versus implementation?
So I think that's a possibility because when we look at that map that's on the 2 previous slides, I believe it is, we did distinguish on the map projects that were submitted by member communities. The blue right there, those are the infrastructure projects that were submitted, and the green were the study projects. So we definitely took note of that from the city of Des Moines submitted projects, and I think that's definitely a possibility. So we're going to be considering that as part of the strategy moving forward. So we might find out, for example, if we have a meeting with another community, they might say, we don't know if we're ready to implement countermeasures on this street. Maybe we need more of a study. We might suss some of that out during the conversations with communities, and we're open to that.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, look forward to hearing more.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have a report on STBG and TAP applications. Gunnar?
Just a brief report out on what we received, just so you all have situational awareness. We got total 27 applications totaling requests of $44 million. We've not received anticipated funding targets yet from IODOT, but we anticipate those sometime this month. Last year, for reference, we allocated about $17 million. So I think it's a safe bet that we're going to have more requests than we're going to have money to award. Not to read all these for you, but here is a summary of all the primary STBG applications. We also have a few applications in the bridge and plan categories on the next slide. And then finally, showing here the TAP applications that were received. Next slide, please. Just for your reference, here's the funding subcommittee. So you'll talk to, and final slide. This is what you can expect from us in the coming month. We're just about ready to deploy the online engagement map for public comment with a comment period of February 12th through 28th. The funding subcommittee meetings are scheduled for March 12th and 25th, respectively. Due to the large number of applications we received, in the interest of having 5 minutes per project, we've split the presentations between those 2 meetings. They're still going to be long meetings. So apologies if you're going to have to come back twice, but we're prioritizing 5 minutes per project. That was our rationale. So as with previous cycles, the recommendations will go before committees in April and will be asked for final approvals in May.
Questions for Gunnar? Thank you. And I appreciate you providing the members of the funding committee. It just helps with prep. So, thank you. Marcus, item 11, you're gonna give us an update on the multimodal economic impact study.
Yes, thank you. So the multimodal economic impact study has been in our UPWP for this entire year. We got approval from policy committee in January to move forward with issuing an RFP for the study. The study's main goals is to quantify economic impacts and benefits of transportation investment, and then a second focus on transit in support of the reimagined DART plan. The RFP was issued Friday, January 24th. It was posted to the MPO's website and then sent to 25 consulting firms, both national and local. Proposals are due tomorrow, and we estimate that the cost somewhere between 200 and 300,000. The MPO has 150,000 available for this study, and then DART has tentatively planned to contribute an amount. We don't know yet. In support of the transit piece of this. Happy to take any questions on this. The schedule for evaluation and hopefully approval of a contract is in the agenda.
Questions for Marcus?
Thank you. Gunnar, item 12, legislative update.
Well, there's been a lot happening. And so we've lumped together one legislative update, and I'm gonna start with the easiest stuff first, and we'll go into the places where we're making our best guesses on what is known today. I also want to pause and say Tony Chavez from Congressman Nunn is here with us today. I appreciate him taking the time to be here. So if there's any more additional clarity you can add at any point, please feel free to do so. Stateside first, I think the committee is aware that we've been working on interstate designation for Purple Heart Highway. We're anticipating bills being introduced primarily first on the House and then a companion bill in the Senate. I would anticipate that in the next week or so. We've been in contact with the lawmakers who are going to be introducing those bills and coordinating with them. A few things it's going to do is guarantee that the federal weight exemption will occur prior to interstate designation. The weight piece is a separate federal issue, but nevertheless, we need assurances for some of our ag stakeholders. We'll do the minimum speed exemption, appropriate $250,000 toward an alternatives analysis. And then the important piece here is that the corridor committees will be called upon. I think it's going to be really important for success this year to have representation in the room during those committee meetings from our corridor communities. We had a meeting earlier, it's all been a blur, was it this week, with Senator Sinclair. Luke, thank you for participating with that. And I think it was really impactful to have you in the room. So this is a real short overview of a long topic. Happy to pick this up and go deeper with anybody if you're interested. But for now, I just want to let you know that we're anticipating bills. Next slide. Also, it's that time of year when we start soliciting projects to be included in the annual DC list. There was a sheet at the table over there that was a copy of last year's as a starting point. So if there's things that are on there from last year that carry over, please let us know. If there are things that need to come off or be added, please let us know. We'll solicit these as part of our post-meeting email. But just heads up, we're starting that gathering process. Next slide. Well, I guess I'll pause. Any questions on the DC list?
On the DC list, can I go back to legislation for a second? Yep. I just wanted to mention for the group, for those that haven't seen, LOSI also introduced House File 192, which addresses the sidewalk liability issue that came out of the Supreme Court last year, for those who haven't seen that. So if you haven't seen it, we need to all support that. House File 192.
Thank you. Would you like the MPO to be there supporting that? Helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone that can support that one, that's a huge liability issue for cities. Yeah, I mean, it's specifically related to sidewalk liability, so.
Okay, on the federal, there's been a lot of action starting with the Unleash American Energy Executive Order. And it targeted components of the last authorization bill that were priorities of the previous administration. There was concern that a strict reading of that order would pause funding for all transportation programs. So there was a flurry of conversations, late night Zoom meetings. And then the following day, the Office of Management and Budget released a memo clarifying the executive order, noting that was really the Green New Deal elements, so related to climate change, electric vehicles, DEI. And then that memo was later rescinded. Next slide. We have been in contact with Iowa DOT concerning federal reimbursements for our own planning activities. That has been unchanged. DOT has been communicating with us that continue to proceed as normal. They're not hearing anything. And their conversations with the FHWA, they're anticipating no hiccups, but that's what we know at this time. Next slide, please. Also, we see the US DOT order entitled Ensuring Reliance Upon Sound Economic Analysis in Department of Transportation Policies, Programs, and Activities. These slides will be published as part of a post-meeting email, and all these links will be here for you to reference if you wish. It provided principles to govern implementation, administration of all DOT policies, programs, and activities. Next slide. A few notable things that came out of that order were rigorous cost benefit requirements, making sure that we're supporting federal goals, not just local political objectives, adhering to Buy America requirements, be mindful not to rely on DOT for future maintenance costs. And then they prioritized several different goals within that memo. They like user pay models, direct funding to opportunity zones, prohibiting funding recipients. They don't want funding going to recipients that are imposing vaccine or mask mandates, require local cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. And then interesting, this drew a lot of attention online, is there was a broad theme throughout that order prioritizing families. They're asking for programs to be administered to maximize benefits for families and communities, including economic opportunity, access to jobs, healthcare, recreation, quality of life, et cetera. And then also to mitigate negative impacts of DOT programs on family-specific difficulties, as shown on there, including preference to communities with marriage and birth rates that are higher than the national average. So, next slide, please. One interesting case study, as this committee probably knows, the MPO is supporting one of our jurisdictions, the city of Windsor Heights, in updating what was a raised application, and as of last month was reverted back to the name of the program under the first Trump administration. It was interesting because it provided a concrete example of the new administration priorities being applied in a concrete way. And in short, it basically stripped the NOFO of the previous administration's priorities related to equity and climate change. And then really tightens the focus on economic factors. So for example, historic disadvantaged communities was redefined as areas of persistent poverty. So a much tighter focus there. And then just as a side note, we were able to update the Windsor Heights grant application appropriately prior to submission. So, you know that. So this is our best assessments at this time of what we know. And I want to preface this that as, you know, this is the best, these are our best we can assume based on what we know. And I welcome differences of opinions here from members, because I know you are all watching these things as well, but we're feeling pretty confident that SDBG and TAP are likely safe based on what we've seen from build. I think there's alignment there. We don't really anticipate big changes there, possibly more changes next cycle. I think the bigger questions are some of the discretionary grant programs. So Safe Streets for All. We're hearing from some corners that there is a fair amount of alignment. The focus on safety of children and families, for example, seems to have alignment there. I think carbon reduction funding, I think that is probably out of alignment. As this group knows, we made awards on that, and part of that was a strategic thing, like it was going to be harder to pull those dollars back if they're already allocated. But we don't know. There's a possibility that we will need to do that. There's a process in place for it. It's been done before. It's a very rare occurrence that has happened in my 10 years here. But I'll pause here, look at Tony, and see if he wants to add anything.
You guys having fun yet? Isn't it the best new administration we've ever been through? Okay. I'll leave the political stuff for the mayors. Let's talk the technical stuff. From our understanding on a lot of this, if the contract's been signed, they're going to pay it. We've already been sending letters to a number of departments with this issue, most popular being things like Census Bureau, where we've got like $3.5 million tied up with municipal funds. So we're having a blast there. Here is what I need from you guys. If there are problems with any departments, they're giving you pushback, they're not following through with commitments, you need to let us know. We will send a letter probably within 48 hours of you guys letting us know. This is very important to us. We know it's very important to the new administration that we're working to kind of more or less pincher these federal departments to make sure things are getting done. So we're going to take advantage of that on our end as well to make sure that anything that's been signed needs to be delivered. If not, the funds need to be returned to the cities. This is a huge priority for us. The second part is, I think Gunner's right on a lot of this. It's just a huge readjustment to the priorities. We don't believe a lot of these programs are going to be pulled back, but we do fundamentally believe they're going to be readjusted. So what does this mean for us? If you have already submitted an application and it does have a lot of the fluffy language from the last administration, let us know. We've talked to a number of cities already, and we are going to write letters of support to try to correct that course and explain the importance of these projects under the new administration. So this is something we want to work with you guys on to make sure that these applications are still going to be as successful as they can be. We want you guys to know we are here to support you guys, support your priorities. We will be meeting with some of the folks from the new Department of Transportation in about a month here. So if there are any priorities you guys have, anything you think we need to be focusing on, I really want you to let us know. We want to be very aggressive with this because we've seen in a lot of other congressional districts across the US, a kind of sit and wait, see what happens attitude. And it's just not the attitude we want to take with it. We want to make sure we're lining up our projects and our priorities now. So that way, as soon as the gates open, we can sprint as fast as we can and try to secure some of this new funding here in Iowa. Do we have any questions so far on that? Anybody? No. Alrighty, for anyone who doesn't have my personal cell phone number, I'd like to give it out now. It is 515-509-9727. I'm right down the street in the Capitol Square building at Skywalk. You can call me day or night, weekends. We've been receiving a lot of calls to our main line right now. So that's not the best place to go, so please call my cell. But the biggest thing for us, more than anything, is that we're doing what it takes to support you guys in your mission on, making Iowa a safer place and trying to figure out the best way to interface with the new administration. We believe that the greatest amount of success that our office can provide comes from making sure that you guys have the connections and relationships with the administration that you need to be successful. And so a lot less will come from us and more of that will come from helping you guys with what you're already doing. Now, is there anything that you guys are worried about or anything we need to be focusing on in the next couple of weeks? You do understand that things are moving very quickly, but we do want to do our best here. Any priorities that you guys are seeing here on the ground outside of what's been discussed today? No? All righty. Next topic or?
Did you give any comments?
I just have some concerns about carbon reduction. We are getting ready to award contracts for that. So recognize you don't know, but that's incredibly important for us to figure out so we can award a contract to be able to do that work.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let's get together at some point and then we'll write a letter to the administration. One of the best things our office can do is get people to commit to putting it in writing on what they're going to do and what the plan is, as well as it, opens up the possibility for possible litigation from municipalities in the future, which isn't a fun topic, but it's one that needs to be handled. So would love to connect on that. I'll give you a copy of my card before I head out today. But if we need to write a letter to the administration saying what is happening to this, it's already been signed, where's my goddamn money? We can do that. But that's the attitude we have right now. It's pretty high stress, but we know this isn't going to last forever. We just need to be ready. Moving on to the next thing. Oh, I'm sorry.
So you had something?
Community project funding.
Okay.
I know it's a very popular topic. I'll be your main point of contact for that here in the district. I'll be working with my counterpart, Eric, in DC. We have not passed the budget yet. We are expecting that to happen in March. Here's what we're doing about that now. We understand that it's very stressful not knowing when that application window is going to open. And year after year, we've seen CPFs go to a new appropriations chair and they say, all right, here are the new rules. Everyone has a week to apply. That's horrifying. It's not fun for anybody. So what we are doing again is we're keeping it as an open application process. We're asking you to give us everything you can today. We will create a file. We will do our best to try to let you know what we believe needs to be put in there or make recommendations off of former applications we've seen that have been successful in front of the appropriations committee. And that way we'll have our foot in the door already. And so by the time we do get the new rules, we can call you and say, hey, these are the new rules. Here's a copy of these new rules. this is what we believe needs to be adjusted from what you sent us ahead of time. So that way you're not scrambling to get this all done in a week. You already have it with us and we can continue to update as the process evolves. So on our end, that just looks like open communication. That's why I like giving my cell phone number out so you guys can call me with any of your questions, worries, or concerns. But that's what we're looking to do again, just an open window and getting everybody in as soon as possible. So we know, like this, what the priorities are, what we're looking at, when the 100 or so applications come in, we have as much information as we can.
Tony, if you want to share anything with us that for collection purposes, we can distribute that after.
Absolutely. And we're going to be, for now, working off the model on the fiscal year 25 community project funding. We believe a lot of the actual application stuff will stay the same. We're uncertain on the HHS bucket, if any of your cities are curious about that. But for the transportation related items, we think it's going to look very, very similar. It's just going to be a little shift in focus as the appropriations committee tries to line itself with the new administration. So, but I can resend the fiscal year 25 items out. And I think the only big thing I need to highlight from last year's applications is we cannot do land acquisition. You got to have the land already or have somebody else supplying it. Federal government doesn't pay for land. It doesn't pay to keep the lights on. So any questions for me or? Okay, I know it's very stressful.
Thank you for that update. Just maybe stress that as you are maybe figuring this out in your communities, if you're learning anything, just share with MPO staff. Because I found that Windsor Heights example will be very helpful and useful. And so the more that the MPO staff know, the more they can help to socialize that or put together a bigger picture, knit it together as to what folks are experiencing. I want to recognize that we're starting to lose folks. So just, I know that we have a couple more items on the agenda. We could just get there. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to go through these real fast. The UPWP item is just to acknowledge that we're going through this process as we do each year. And if there keep going, adding a couple more slides. If there are projects or things that you want, things I was working on, please speak up. I'm just going to skip right over this if we just remove it. But that's our main takeaway here is please feel free to reach out to us or things you want us to do in the next fiscal year. Any questions on that? Thank you.
Questions on that? Thank you, Gunnar. Thank you. And then one other item, go for it.
Mark brought this up. There's a conference on April 3rd and 4th that many of you may be attending that would conflict with the meeting that we have scheduled for Thursday, April 3rd. So just want to put this forward for you discussion. It's not an action item, so we'd have to formally adopt any change in schedule at our next meeting. But wanted to put it in front of you for discussion here. And if we had direction, we could start things moving.
I'd like to move it. I'm scheduled to speak at that conference at like 11 on Thursday.
Yeah, I can move it as well.
So I'm hearing a lot of nods.
Yeah, so there's a lot of nods there. I think maybe because it's not up for vote, not on the agenda as a vote, we won't vote on that, but staff will bring back an option to vote on it at the next meeting.
Maybe what
Do
I'll
we need
do,
to vote on that or staff just?
typically we do it. What I would suggest is step one, I'll put a doodle poll in the follow-up meeting so you guys can weigh in. I'm thinking probably the Tuesday of that week is Monday or Tuesday of that week would be my guess. And then we'll update calendar invites, update the website, and we can just formalize it at the March meeting.
If you go to Tuesday of that week, that's the last day of the National Planning Conference that many of the planners will be at.
Well,
So you're having the other half of your committee.
just the plan. So there's no good that you're saying.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Wednesday, maybe.
Gunnar will put a couple options out there. Appreciate that intel for him to think about. Okay.
Thank you.
Any upcoming events?
They're in your packet as a reference. We've stopped speaking to them at this agenda, trying to keep things tight and relevant and meaningful discussion. Appreciate everyone's sticking with us. We had a lot of meaningful conversation today. I really appreciate your direction. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't believe staff has any other non-action items. Are there any members who have any non-action items? If not, I will say we have our next meeting on March 6th at 9:30 and entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.